Power 98.7 Podcasts. Uncensored. Power 98.7. Now we're talking.
It is 9 minutes to the top of the hour. So, born on August 21st, 1974 in north central Philadelphia in the United States of America, Dr. Umar Johnson is the eldest of 11 children. And one of his ancestors is the great abolitionist Frederick Douglass. So proudly receiving his humility and compassion from his mom and the discipline and the firmness from his drill instructor for the United States Marine Corps father. It's this collaborative upbringing that's influenced a lot of his thinking, a lot of his behavior. So Dr. Johnson has become synonymous with Black culture, with Pan-Africanism, and he preaches intensively about creating exclusive Black spaces and establishing the Africa Town model. And known affectionately as the Prince of Pan-Africanism, Dr. Umar Johnson has for years dedicated his life to encouraging the Black culture. And he's not only become an internet sensation, but a powerhouse that has changed the views of Black people everywhere. And he is in the country. He joins us on the line. Dr. Umar Johnson, welcome to Power Life.
Good evening, sister. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for your time. So, first, how many days have you been in South Africa now? I know this is not your first trip.
I believe this is my third evening.
Your third evening. So,
Yeah.
what has the last 3 days been like for you? Because you've got quite an intensive tour coming up.
Yes, ma'am. It's been phenomenal. 2 days ago, we were at the Market Square Theater in Johannesburg, and yesterday we was at Tswane with the Bobo Shanti Rastafari family. That was phenomenal. They jam-packed the event. The first event was also jam-packed. So the reception has been tremendous, and I'm just thankful and grateful that my brothers and sisters here in Azania have received me in the way that they have.
So let's talk about your early childhood development. When and where did you learn the idea of Pan-Africanism?
I would say that I was a Pan-Africanist before I ever heard the word. I would say that the biggest influence on me in my early years was a mandatory African history course that we received in elementary school during my 4th and 5th grade years. So that's about 9 and 10 years old. Miss Green was the Black history teacher, and I think she lit a spark in myself and many of my classmates to learn more about who we were, and to actually be proud of who we were. And I guess myself, more than any of my classmates, I kind of ran with it. It was just a natural thing for me, and I would probably have to credit her with that.
Yeah. So how important is the need for Black history globally? When what we're seeing right now are a lot of hate crimes towards Black people?
It's extremely important, especially now, because we see an effort all across the world, especially in European contexts, such as South Africa, Canada, the United Kingdom, and the United States, where many state departments of education are in the middle of creating a revisionist model of history. For example, in Texas, the state of Texas in the United States, the state Board of Education has decided to no longer include slavery as a subject in the history book or in the curriculum. And they no longer will refer to Africans as having been enslaved. Instead, our ancestors will be listed as indentured servants. And so you see, this is a global movement to once again erase African people from history, erase the evils, and to sanitize white supremacy as they prepare for their new world order.
I mean, indentured servant, what does that even mean?
An indentured servant is someone who voluntarily submits to temporary slavery in exchange for freedom, in exchange for jail sentence, in exchange for money. But the difference between indentured servitude and European chattel slavery is with indentured servitude, it is voluntary and it is time limited, and it is in exchange for something that you want. Whereas with European chattel slavery, it is involuntary, it is perpetual, which means not only were you a slave, but every child that proceeded from your womb was also a slave. So that means the slave master owned generations of the same family for hundreds of years, and there was no way to get out of it. So it is a very serious, gross misrepresentation of the truth. But we know in our contact with European people, they have always been about misrepresenting the truth. But when you spoke about the impact of knowing who you are, I would say, psychologically speaking, since I am a psychologist, half of our self-esteem, half of our self-image is based on what we believe our people to have been before our birth. Very few people are born self-motivated enough to overcome negative stereotypes and indoctrinations about their capabilities. So because of that, white children are born into the world with a historical privilege, with a privilege of having all history written to their benefit. And African children, by sharp contrast, are born with an inferiority complex because our history is largely distorted, ripped off, robbed, and treated as if it never existed. So if you want to raise the self-esteem of black children, you're going to have to teach them unapologetic African history.
We love that. We love that. And we need that. Why have you chosen to dedicate your life to this cause?
I think that I was born with the mission. I really do. Some people come to black consciousness because they were kind of brought into it by others. Some people come to black consciousness as a reaction to the way that they were treated by the larger white power structure or status quo. In other words, a lot of people come to this because they were not allowed to participate in the European reality. For me, it was neither of those. Since that Black History class, and I even have classmates who would argue that even before the Black History class, as I ran into one of their brothers a few years ago, since as long as I can remember, I have always been about the business of resurrecting my people, even before I knew what Pan-Africanism was, even before I came in contact with the teachings of Marcus Garvey. Now, being a school psychologist, it was very interesting the way those two worlds collided, because on the one hand, you have a Pan-Africanist who was about the global unification and upliftment of African people. On the other hand, you have this psychologist who works in the schools. Well, I was able to marry my Pan-African vision to my professional work as a psychologist, because in working in the schools, I saw how miseducation, as well as special education, as well as psychiatric medication, and as well as juvenile incarceration was being used as the first stage, the foundational strategy to disadvantage African males. And so in seeing how schooling is used as a weapon of white supremacy to disadvantage and ill-prepare African children, my Pan-Africanism found its root with my profession.
And speaking of miseducation, when we come back, we're going to get into conversation about the importance of education, especially in light of the fact that universities in South Africa are burning. We're going to talk about the importance of education with the hashtag fees must fall. And when we come back, we'll also be taking your calls on 0861 987 000. And we'll also get to talk about Dr. Umar Johnson's idea of the Africa Town model. And you can tweet me at Masichaba Ndlovu. The hashtag is PowerLife.
Power Life with Masichaba Ndlovu, Monday to Thursday, 7 to 9 p.m. on Power 98.7. Now we're talking.
It is 8 minutes after 8 p.m., famously quoted as saying, powerfully, our greatest problem after white supremacy is ourselves. It's always the elephant in the room. The resources are there, the expertise are there, the degrees are there, the personnel is there. So why aren't we doing it? It is the self-hatred, the ego of the Negro is keeping us in our situation. So Dr. Umar Johnson joins us on the line and allowing us to tap into his journey, exploring and unpacking his concept and understanding of Pan-Africanism. So Doctor, let's expand a little bit on your idea of establishing the Africa Town model.
Yes. The main thing that needs to be said about the Africa Town model, and mind you, tonight I just came from one of the shopping plazas here in Johannesburg, and I saw about 10 different shops, and not a single one was owned by a member of the African family. So that means that in post-apartheid South Africa, our people are still not being given an opportunity to generate their own streams of wealth. I think it is disrespectful for the ruling government to allow non-African people to come to South Africa and establish revenue streams through small and medium businesses, forcing our people to work for them.
Yes.
Working for foreigners in the land of your birth is a form of oppression. No one should have to work for foreigners in the land of their birth. And the reason that we are in a situation where we have to work for them is because foreigners come to South Africa with streams of credit from native banks in their homeland. And if they can't get the stream of credit from the native bank, they can get the stream of credit from banks here in South Africa. The same banks that will systematically deny a South African the opportunity to tap into a medium-sized business loan will gladly give it to the Chinese, gladly give it to the Indian,
Yes.
gladly give it to the Anglo-Saxon. So you're looking at economic racism and economic apartheid. See, the social apartheid may have ended. The social apartheid ended in 1994. And for the past 22 years, South Africa has been under economic apartheid. In other words, Bantu, stay in your place.
Oh, that is the truth. You know, just before my conversation with you, I was chatting to a young, powerful man who's 26 years old, who's got 9 qualifications. And he was economically, rather financially excluded from university in 2010, had to write an email to the president. And by God's grace, the president responded positively, and that's how he was able to complete his studies. And he turned down an opportunity to work overseas so he can come back and contribute to our economy. And he's been told he is an overachiever. He is overqualified and unemployable. What does that mean?
That's the same strategy that they use in the West. They use it in the UK. They use it in Canada. They use it in the United States, where they tell African people, you don't have enough qualifications to fulfill this position. So you go back to school to get the qualifications. You come back, and once again, they tell you that you still don't have enough. So first you got your associate's degree. You ran back to get your bachelor's degree. You ran back again to get your master's degree. And then you come back now, and now they tell you all of a sudden that you are overqualified. That is a ridiculous concept. How can someone be too qualified to work? How can someone be too qualified to take care of their family, to raise their children? That's just a strategy that white supremacy uses to keep black people economically disenfranchised. The truth of the matter is they were not going to hire you in the first place.
Yes.
They weren't going to hire you in the first place. They were simply hoping that you did not have the drive, determination, or economic ability to go back to college and finish your studies. That was the hope. But even if you finish, when you come back, they will now stamp you as overqualified.
Wow. Dr. Umar Johnson joins us on Power Life. We're taking your calls on 0861 987 000. Let's go to Bongani in Soweto. Good evening, Bongani.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fantastic. And how are you?
Awesome, thank you. I'm just so inspired by Dr. Umar, and I'm a huge fan of his work. I've read a lot of stuff that he's written. I've listened to a lot of videos that he has recorded, and I just wanted to say to him, thank you for conscientizing us black people, for liberating us from this white supremacy economy that we live in. And I just wanted to really thank him and wish him all the best with his tour here in South Africa. I actually wanted to attend his tour this past weekend, but the tickets were sold out, so too bad.
Sorry about that. And thank you so much for the love. Let's go to Mary Ann in Pretoria. Good evening, Mary Ann.
Good evening, Masachaba. How are you today, this evening?
I'm well. How are you, Mary Ann?
I am very good, thank you. I'd just like to say to Dr. Umar Johnson, I am so excited about him being in South Africa. I cannot wait for his Pretorian tour. And I've actually come across Dr. Umar while I was on Facebook. He was talking about how black people are always competing against each other to outdo each other.
Yeah.
And I actually went to YouTube and I actually watched some of his videos, and he actually taught me how to love myself as a black person.
Wow.
Because for all these years, we've been told that we're not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
We've been told that we are not qualified enough, and then we come back and we are overqualified.
Yes.
So we're never good enough for the society. And Dr. Umar Johnson has actually made me realize that I am good enough.
Wow.
I'm a queen.
Wow.
And yeah.
Yes,
Dr.
queen.
Umar Johnson.
Yes.
Queen. Exactly.
Yes.
So I'll keep on listening. Thank you for the awesome show, and I'm so excited about Dr. Umar. And I told my mom to listen in, so
That's
hopefully
fantastic.
she is listening.
Thank you so much, Marianne. Let's go to Matome in Sunnyside. Good evening, Matome.
Evening, Mas Chava, and evening to Dr. Umar. Mas Chava, in most cases, we as black people do not want to get to a point where we can appreciate ourselves.
Yeah.
You see, it starts with us. And, I mean, the lady that just spoke before me correctly pointed it out. Watching Dr. Omar's videos and, following whatever he would post, I mean, sometimes we'll find when you go and read upon what he has written, you realize there's so much that black people are lacking, and it's not inflicted by anyone. It's us doing it to ourselves.
Right.
I mean, I'll give you an example. You see, I'm from the rural areas.
Yeah.
And I go there, I say, as young people, we want to start something. The chiefs will give you a run around. And then an outside person, someone from a foreign land, comes and asks for the same land. He gets it. And you ask yourself, how does it happen? I'm the son of the soil. I'm supposed to get first preference. Now, it becomes very difficult. And now I've got one question. If one was to try and mobilize African people towards the common goal, what do you do?
All right. That's a great question. Doctor, I'll give you an opportunity to respond before we take more calls.
Certainly. Two things are essential whenever you want to bring about a regeneration of African people in any community, any country, any continent, and that is education and economic stabilization. We need black banks in South Africa so we can finance infrastructure in our own communities. We know that the Anglo-Saxon, the Indian, and the Chinese, they benefit from us being economically dominated. They are not going to finance black power. They're not going to finance it, which means we have to create black power on our own. And the way we do that is by starting our own savings and loan institutions, our own credit unions, and our own small banks. We can start small, but we need all Africans in every township and every city to commit to taking their take-home pay and putting it into the black bank before they spend it. If they do that, we will have enough interest off of the deposits where we can build our own hospital so our elders don't have to go to these white-run hospitals and receive inferior medical care. We can build our own schools so our children aren't forced to learn in these dilapidated schools in the townships, or their parents don't have to go into debt paying for them to go to the Indian private school. No South African child should have to be at an Indian or Chinese-run private school. They should be at an African-run private school. So the solution is to take our pennies, take our rand, and pull them together, and then we can get this done. By ourselves, we cannot solve the problem, but together we are unstoppable.
Yes. Power to you, Doctor. And on the issue of education, I'm sure you're well aware that there's a lot of strife happening at the moment. There are protests happening all over the country at various universities. Students have been at the struggle for years with the hashtag fees must fall. Black children are being financially excluded from universities such as WITS, and it's spreading right across to many universities across South Africa. And they're standing up. They're saying we want free education. And yet there are voices, some black and some white who say these kids are disrupting the system. Some voices have said they are wasting their time. They need to, stop.
They're not wasting their time.
Yes.
They're not wasting their time. The first reaction of any power structure towards any petition by oppressed people is to ignore them and to deny them. They have to make it appear as if the protests don't matter. The students have to keep the fight up and they have to keep the push going. And the reason why they spiked the fees in the first place is because in post-apartheid South Africa, they have to protect white supremacy. And in order to protect white supremacy, you have to protect white privilege. That means you have to keep South Africans undereducated so you can justify why there's not more black faces in high places.
Yes.
Once you allow so many Africans to get an education, now you have to explain why we only have a few doctors. Now you have to explain why we only have a few engineers. Now you have to explain why we only have a few businessmen or businesswomen. So by denying the education, you perpetuate the status quo. That's why they hiked the fees in the first place, so they can limit our access to opportunity. What the children is doing is absolutely correct. They have to do it because in order for your voice to be heard in the chambers of power, it has to be so strong and so loud that it forces the power to come and sit down at the table. And until the government is ready to sit at the table with the students, they must keep going. And the reason they are stalling as much as they are because they know that if they capitulate to the students, then that's going to give the incentive for other issues that's going on in Black South Africa to be brought to the surface as well. In other words, this is just the beginning. This is a windfall event that can bring about a true economic transformation in South Africa.
Dr. Umar Johnson for president. Power to you. We're going to take a few calls very briefly because we're running out of time. Koketso Moloko in Magaliesburg. Good evening.
Yes, I'm Astraba.
Yes, ma'am. Go right ahead.
Yes, I just want to make my firstly, I admire Dr. Umar Johnson. Good evening to you and him. I just wanted to just ask him a question to say, does he think the hegemonic system, the best way to bring it down is to basically get into it and then try to bring it down from the inside, or to bring it down, burn it down or whatever, and then construct your own system? How does he think we should go about tackling hegemony? Because this is pretty much what we, as people of the world, if you want to say people of color, everybody's kind of facing a similar type of system. So how do we bring down hegemony and tackle it?
All right, got it. Thank you. Before we answer that, let's go to Zamani in Davidton. Very briefly, Zamani, good evening.
Good evening, Masichava, and good evening to Dr. Omar there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like the way he's just saying it straight, like saying African, not the word African American. His ideology of Pan-Africanism fit well with what we call, we must accept the Azanian revolution that is happening in our country. And in any revolution, there must be madness. And I applaud him for applauding what they are doing. Thank you.
Well said. Thank you so much. Tabo in Florida, very brief comment. Good evening.
Hi, Mashab. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
I'm good, thanks. And evening to the doctor. This afternoon I was sitting in McDonald's in Florida, né?
Yeah.
And I witnessed not that Raditaba.
Yeah.
But I witnessed an Indian giving another Indian business there and then quickly, done and dusted, no issues, no questions, no nothing. And to myself, why can't we do the same?
Yeah.
Why can't we do the same? And I like, we bring ourselves down because last 3 weeks ago, I attended an event about vacation. It's about for kids. And
we're losing you. The line is pretty bad, so we're going to have to let that go. But, Doctor, before we let you go, if we can just answer the question that was asked by the young lady on
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, and that was a very good question. The first thing that has to be stated is that any program for South African empowerment, for Pan-Africanism, cannot be one-dimensional. So her question as to, do we fight the system from the outside or do we fight the system from the inside? You are to do both simultaneously. We need loyalists inside the system working to dismantle as much as we need people outside the system. So it's not an either or. You need both. However, fighting outside the system is always going to be much more effective than fighting within the system, because institutions don't change. You either tear them down or you reform them, but they do not change, which means when you go into a system to try to change it, the system often ends up changing you.
Wow. Dr. Umar Johnson, thank you so much for your time. I'm aware that you're traveling all over the country. Can people still see you in Joburg?
Oh, yes, they can. In fact, tomorrow I will be at a sports center in Sybil King, Zone 14, if that sounds familiar to you.
Yes, it does. Indeed.
Yes, I will be there at 5 o'clock tomorrow. The Saul, I know I'm pronouncing it wrong, Sotelsi Sports Center, Sybil King, Zone 14, 5 o'clock tomorrow. And then on Wednesday, I'll be in Jefferstown at the Adudawa Republic Restaurant. If anyone needs information about my schedule and where I'm going to be, they can call Empress Ima at 072-872-5778. I repeat, 072-872-5778, or they can add me personally on WhatsApp at +1 215-989-9858. Again, +1 215-989-9858, and I will text them the schedule. Amandla.
Inspiring change. Power 98.7. Now we're talking.